Hello everybody and welcome to our case review in 2026 of our 2025 cases. As you might have seen or noticed, we have a few minutes delay because for whatever reason YouTube didn't like us today at all. We might need to make a small change before we can actually show you some slides because the OBS connection to YouTube somehow has a big issue. Nevertheless, I still wanted to start with a few introductory words, how we think about case reports in general, what we include as quality data, and so on and so on. And then we might take a small break, as I mentioned, while the team is quickly putting in the right slides. Most of you, I think, know us. We are Tomorrow.bio, and we work with an organization called the European Biostasis Foundation, which is a foundation in Switzerland that does the long-term storage of cryopreserved patients. And then there's also the Patient Care Foundation, which is again also a Swiss foundation that manages the money and is kind of the organization that ensures long-term stability and safety if need be. Now, this of course is not only there to present the cases, but it's also there to do a Q&A. And since I don't have slides yet, you would need to go to sli.do, slido, sli.do, and then put in the following number, 1306663. And there you can ask any question that you might have about the case reports, about us in general, even though in these case report webinars or events, I always prioritize the questions about our cases. So I'm trying to answer all questions that you might have, but prioritize the ones that are about the cases. Now, when we think about case reports in a very general high-level sense, for us, case reports are there to have an internal and external accountability mechanism, right? So that everybody knows how we do, how well the cryopreservation quality of our cases is, and so on. And of course, I would be the first to argue that every organization for every case, every preservation or cryopreservation organization in the world should publish case reports. Because otherwise, great or grandiose claims can be made, but you should back this up with data. For us, case reports always focus on the outcome and quality data. So we don't have tremendously long write-ups about what exactly was, how the case started and how we talked to the person and so on, but rather on the quality and the outcome data. So that means temperature curves, that means S-mix, that means CT scans, and so on and so on. Last but not least, I think it's very important that every case report includes these quality metrics. Quality metrics in cryopreservation are not super easy. It's not really, since we cannot, warm anybody up yet and kind of really show that, the person or the animal or the model organism can be revived. We need to have surrogate parameters, surrogate data. And the most important ones here would be CT scanning and electron microscopy. CT scanning shows you that the brain, most importantly, of course, and ideally also a good chunk of the rest of the body is well perfused with that cryoprotective agent so that no ice crystals can form. And then electron microscopy data shows you that the ultrastructure of the brain looks as close as possible as it is supposed to be. So I recently posted like a small thing on Discord, in the Cryosphere Discord, basically saying, if there's no case reports, big red flag. If there is no EM data or CT scan data, that's also red flag. And last but not least, if over time the quality of the case reports don't get better, that's also red flag. So, call us out on all of these three if we should ever continue not to do this. Our case reports are always released once per year. We always do it in January for the last year to show everybody and of course have these Q&A events. We don't have any personal identifiable information in the case report, just to give you a bit of an overview. And whenever we publish case reports for immersion vitrifixation cases, since they go very, very long, this immersion vitrifixation, especially the immersion with the cryoprotective agent, takes months and months and months, for us slightly above 12 months usually. We publish preliminary reports that we then update. And if we have new new kind of like a new quality metric that we can employ for older case reports, we also update older case reports with that. There's one that we will show you today, which is an improvement of how we do the calibration for the CT scans. And I show you some of what we do there and how this works today. And last but not least, all our case reports always in the end include a list of what didn't go well. Because you need to always remember, cryopreservation cases are not done under lab conditions. They're done under real-world emergency medicine-like conditions. So there's stuff that goes wrong. And my problem is not necessarily some stuff that goes wrong, even though we do everything with training and simulated cases that the least possible amount of stuff goes wrong. What should not happen that stuff goes wrong multiple times, or stuff goes wrong that should already be 100% working. So I think the important point here is that we try to always improve. Stuff will go wrong, but then the goal is to never do this again and fix it if it happens. Now, very briefly, let me tell you how we think about our approach about quality. Now, preservation quality is the highest, kind of metric or the highest priority for our cases. And when I say preservation quality, if need be, we would prioritize structural preservation over viability right now, because viability in cryopreservation is anyway not a thing that works right now. So structural preservation, the part that, as far as we understand, makes you you and makes me me, memory, identity, personality, everything that we value, structure is important for that. We very, very strongly focus on improving what is the highest priority. So there is a tremendous long tail of things that you can improve in cryopreservation cases or general preservation cases. But then again, most organizations in the world that offer cryopreservations are not funded with multiple billions of dollars, unfortunately. So there's the need to prioritize, and we always try to prioritize very much on what we deem to be the high impact thing. Then all of our cases have CT scans. We're now starting to have electron microscopy data as well. Don't have it to show yet, but in a couple of weeks probably we will do a separate events with electron microscopy data. We now have the first case where we have not only CT scan data, but where we had consent to take electron microscopy data as well. The reason why we can't do this with every case is because for electron microscopy, you need to take small samples of either the brain and or the spinal column. And of course, we only do that if we have consent from the people who sign up with us. Since we thought it will take longer to optimize the CT scans, in the very beginning, when we started out, we did not ask for consent. We've now started to do that, and quick update for everybody, around 38% of people who sign up with us over the last month give consent to take these samples. Of course, on average, people who sign up with us are relatively young. So it will probably still take a while until we have significantly more data on electron microscopy. But hopefully, more and more people will give consent, and then we will be able to optimize that more and more as well. As a heads up, probably optimization of electron microscopy will take longer than it did for the CT scan quality metric. But let's see. There's one more important thing before we take a 2-minute break to then put in the right slides. When we think about who's responsible for cryopreservation cases, we have this concept of that we take responsibility for everything. And one step below that, we separate between direct responsibility and indirect responsibility. Most of the things that can go wrong, or that at least that we have an impact on to improve next time, would fall under direct responsibility. So that would, for example, mean if we perform a cryopreservation case and a procedure was done incorrectly. For whatever, perfusion wasn't done right. We didn't take the right cryoprotective agent. That would be a very big problem. But let's say we didn't maintain temperature right, or we didn't do the initial cardiopulmonary support fast and well enough. These things, of course, would be a direct responsibility. We should have trained our teams better, and so on and so on. And And then there's indirect responsibility. So indirect responsibility, we consider things like if we're being told, we get a call and someone tells us that one of our members has died yesterday. Now, of course, we're going to try to send the team to that location as quick as possible, but in most cases, this will then end up to be a straight freeze. Right? If there's too much time passed, perfusion is not advisable anymore. It's most likely even detrimental. So in that case, it would be a straight freeze. Now, of course, we could argue, well, listen, we've been told a day after that person died. So what can we do? We do it as best as possible. But I think this would create more of a problem than it solves. So in this case, we would still take what we call indirect responsibility for that. And that basically means, what we could have done, we could have told people more that they should contact us earlier. Maybe there was some problem where it could have been foreseen. Maybe the person had some, maybe not terminal condition, but at least some condition. Or we could have informed, the family and the friends and whoever contacted us in the end. We could have advised them to, make sure that they don't delay if something happens, and so on and so on. Of course, I'm not saying that we will have a crazy amount of impact in every case, but in some cases, we will have an impact, right? We could have built better systems, like, what the app-based system that we built with the smart rings, and so on and so on. So pretty much, we take responsibility for whatever the reason was why the quality of a cryopreservation case is not good. We take responsibility for that. And of course, in some cases, again, I think the impact is we will not have that much impact, but we will still try. And we will always explain why a case didn't go as it was supposed to do. But in the end, it's still our responsibility. Now, from a metric standpoint, very briefly, CT scanning is our main metric for evaluation of cryopreservation quality. CT scanning basically tells you how well did the cryoprotective agent get into all of the brain. Is it everywhere? Is it uniform? Is it high enough so that when you cool down, no ice crystals form in these regions? Without CT scans, everything else is you need good CT scans to have any chance of having the rest good. Right? Bad CT scans means everything else is also bad. Good CT scans mean, okay, cryoprotective agent is everywhere, but now you need to add two more metrics that kind of tell you the same thing. One would be SMIX, the standardized measurement of ischemic exposure, which basically gives you an evaluation of how much ischemia there was, which in turn means how good the ultrastructure will look, the fine structure of the brain, or how much degradation there was already. And then, of course, the perfect measurement for that would be taking a small sample again and doing electron microscopy and looking at the ultrastructure. As I mentioned, this will be the next frontier, and that will probably be the frontier for a while. But of course, I would argue it's absolutely important. So these are the three main things that you can look at for outcome data, except for these, of course, indirect measurements like, temperature and cooling curves and pressure and so on. CT scanning, SMIX, and electron microscopy and ultrastructure. What we tried, and some of you might remember, what we said we're going to do last year in 2025, we said we're going to switch our CT scans to negative 196 degrees Celsius, which we've done for every case now. So that worked. We wanted to establish electron microscopy to evaluate ultrastructure. Unfortunately, we didn't have many cases where this was allowed, but at least we had one, and we established the procedures. Not everything went 100% correct there, but still we established it and have learned, and we'll do it better next time. We said we are building more local capabilities. We've done that mostly in Europe, but also partially in the US. We said we're going to work on bringing the quality standards that we have in Europe here to the US. That's still an ongoing topic, and I will elaborate a bit later once I show you the case reports. And we're going to work on having better data for SMIX, meaning better temperature data for SMIX. Basically, if your temperature data is not reliable and good, you can't calculate an SMIX well. So that is also done. So most of what we planned for 2025 was completed. And one topic, quality standards of Europe in US, it's still ongoing. Going forward, so 2026 and then probably in the next couple of years as well, electron microscopy and ultrastructure data, getting more of it and improving how we do the procedures will be very, very important. As I said, 38% of our current members or more the recent signups agree to give consent. And for those of you who are members with us who have not given consent, you can also just give consent to have a spinal column sample taken, right? Not a brain sample, but a spinal column sample, which of course would be less invasive, still invasive, but less invasive than a brain sample. Even though, of course, when I say brain sample, these are microsamples. So they're extremely small, similar size that are also taken during neurosurgery. So as much as we currently understand, likely without significant or any impact on memory and so on and so on. US quality standards will be a big focus, and we will host a separate live event that will be announced soon on quality of preservation. And now I will be briefly off screen to put up the slides, and then we'll continue with those. All right, welcome back. Most of you, all of you, hopefully should see the slides now. And I'll walk you through all the case data. And then, of course, those case reports will also go live over the weekend on our webpage. And then you can run through them yourself and check it out and so on. Now, we have kind of four big topics today. One would be briefly showing you the reanalysis of our last year's cases, right? I mentioned that we improved the evaluation there. Then European cases, US cases, and immersion vitrifixation cases. And then, of course, the fifth topic would be Q&A, and then feel free to ask all of the questions. Right? If you go to Slido, this link that I will show again, you can upvote, you can put questions, ask questions, and you can also up and downvote them. My team can maybe put the link to the Slido into YouTube chat. Now, if we go to the next slide, here you see how we do these calibrations or how we analyze CT scans. Basically, what a CT scan gives you, it gives you the density of something, measured in so-called Hounsfield units. So if you CT scan something that is very dense, you get white. Basically, it's in a grayscale in the end, it's white. If it's low density, it's more towards black. That's why when some of you might remember CT scans, the skull, the bone is white, and then the rest of the brain has different shades of gray. Now, of course, to get a bit of a more visual impression, we then color correct or put pseudo colors on these CT scans. How we do this in the past, or how we did this in the past, is we scanned pure samples of cryoprotective agent. You see this here on the left side of the screen. These were individual cryoprotective vials that we cooled down to negative 196 degrees Celsius, and then we CT scanned them. And since they have different concentrations, you see there's different colors, right? And these colors are basically set by us, where we say if there is a low cryoprotective agent concentration, that's going from blue to red. And then if there's a high cryoprotective agent concentration, that's going to green. And of course, everything that is green, we calibrated it in a way where green means here is enough cryoprotective agent to not have ice formation. Now, what you see under this image, it says EG and DMSO. The thing that you basically scan that makes that density is ethylene glycol and DMSO. These are the two main components of those cryoprotective agents. What you mostly scan is DMSO, because there's a sulfur in the DMSO, which has a high molecular weight, which gives this density. This will become important going forward. Now, how we do this going forward, and that's also why we have done this recalibration, and all of the scans that you see from this year will have that new methodology. Pure samples, of course, don't include the brain, whereas in reality, of course, you scan the brain plus the cryoprotective agent. So we built new calibration curves that are made up, of course, of the cryoprotective agent, which again is EG and DMSO mostly, plus brain tissue. So we basically took pig brains and then immersion cryoprotected them over a very long time to make sure that the cryoprotective agent surely has gotten everywhere. And then we scanned them and made these new calibration curves out of it. If you see on the next slide, these are the different cryoprotective agent concentrations that are kind of relevant for these analyses. It's 10%, 30%, 60%, 65%, and 70% of that cryoprotective agent. You perfuse with 70% to get 65, somewhere between 60 and 65% in the tissue to have enough cryoprotective agent. And here you see two numbers. These are these Hounsfield units that basically give you the density value, where you see that we have pure samples and brain samples. Pure samples is how we did in the past, and brain samples how we're doing it now, or have been doing it. And what you luckily see that at the higher end, so where we are interested in the 60, 65, and 70% range, these two brain samples and pure samples are very similar, if not the same. So in hindsight, we might not needed to do this at all. But of course, we didn't know that brain plus cryoprotective agent generate almost the same Hounsfield as cryoprotective agent alone. So good that we did it. From going forward, all of the calibrations will be done with the correct brain samples, and have already for this year. But in the end, we wouldn't have needed them. And on the next slide, you see one of these old cases. So this is a 2024 case. Some of you might remember this, right? Again, here, the brain basically is completely green. The edge that you see around the brain on the right picture, where you have like this more reddish, more yellowish range. This is fluid-filled area, so the brain has shrunken. So that part, there is no brain tissue in here, and then the parts in the brain are mostly the ventricles. So the brain tissue, the white and the gray matter, are almost completely perfused. On the next slide, you see another example where, again, the whole brain, except for the ventricles, again, there is no brain tissue around and in there and around the brain. You see it best here on the bottom left small image, where you have like a ring around the brain that is not that is more reddish and more yellowish, but this case there doesn't need to be any brain tissue. Now, if we go to this year's cases, On the next slide, you see a quick overview of all the quality or the data, what's going on for these cases. On the top left, you always see temperature and what happened. On the bottom left, you see refractive index. On the top right, you see pressure. And on the bottom right, you see temperature during the final cool down. Briefly to say here, so temperature dropped initially, of course, then at some point perfusion starts, and then temperature drops much faster because now you can internally cool. We had a bit of an issue here with pressure. It is partially too low, but it mostly is the problem that we did not have digital pressure sensors here that automatically record this. So these spikes to the bottom, these are just moments, and then it goes back to in this what we say here, what is labeled as ideal range, where you want to perfuse. We will likely update this chart because we had a cryopreservation case in a cool down, and over the last couple of days, the team was not able to go through this video. All of our cryopreservation cases are always A to Z video recorded with multiple cameras. And since this was not automatically recorded here, the pressure, you need to go through this video and basically write down the pressure for every minute. Here, this is every 5 minutes, where where it goes down to low pressure. This is where bags were changed and so on, which again is not ideal, shouldn't happen. But in the end, you will see in the next slides, the perfusion is complete. So it didn't turn out to be an issue, but it's of course not ideal. On the left side, bottom left, you kind of already see this, the refractive index. Refractive index is basically the measurement of how high is the cryoprotective agent concentration on the venous side. So you put high concentration cryoprotective agent into the artery, in our case into the ascending aorta. And then on the other side, when it has fully flown through the body, you take it out again and then you measure the concentration. So this already gives you an estimation because you see that in the end, the cryoprotective agent at the end, towards the end of perfusion, has reached the terminal concentration around the 65 to 70% range. 65-70%, you perfuse again with 70% to get somewhere between 60 and 65% in tissue. And then cool down here, basically what we want to do, cool down needs to be done very, very slowly. We do not have ITS doers yet, even though they're being delivered soon. Meaning we want to cool down to these cryogenic temperatures very slowly to avoid fracturing. And by the way, if there's more questions on any of these topics, feel free to let me know in the end, and I'll try to get through to many questions as possible. You want to be around 1 degree per hour for cool down, and here we are in that range. Now, if we're going to the next slide, similar case. One more thing. For P-21, we unfortunately do not have CT scans because that was a third-party case, so we only did SST. So we were only contracted for SST, whereas the storage organization was someone else. And then since we need to ship them was a German person, ship them to the long-term storage facility, we're not able to bring them to Switzerland and then CT scan them, and also this would be a delay, which of course we cannot do. P-26, if you go one slide back, this is another case. You see, similar curves here. There was one power outage in our ambulance, which means for a part of the data points here, we need to put manually the temperature data in again. On the top right, again, you see pressure here in this case within the ideal range. We always try to perfuse initially at higher pressure and then go down over time. Refractive index here as well hits the target and cool down similar to what we did before. Now before the case. Now going to the CT scans. So this is the CT scan on the next slide of this P-26 patient. As you can see, the whole brain is green, as we discussed. That shows that the concentration of the cryoprotective agent is high enough to not have ice crystal formation. There's one unique thing here. You see it on the bottom left picture the best. There is this line in the brain, kind of. It looks like it would be in the brain, right? You see these big black areas, this is air. There is no cryoprotective agent in there, of course. This is due to shrinkage. And then you see like this line where on the inside it's green, on the outside it's green. On the inside, that's brain tissue. On the outside, that's high concentration cryoprotective agent. So there is no brain tissue there. It's basically just cryoprotective agent that is high concentration. If you go to the next slide, you kind of can see this a bit more in detail. We always analyze how much shrinkage there is. Here you see this dotted line. That dotted line denotes where the brain is. On the outside, again, that's also green. It doesn't matter, to be fair, what color this is, if it's low concentration, high concentration. Here it's a bit more difficult to differentiate because it's the outside green and inside green. But the brain basically ends at this line. Everything else is shrinkage. It's around 35 to 40% shrinkage is kind of common with us. Right, so these are the cases. If we go one step back, again, this is how a cryopreservation. One slide back, please, to the colored CT scans. This is how a cryopreservation case should look. Basically, the whole brain is green. There are some areas here in the brain. You see, for example, this red dot kind of on the right picture. These are areas where the ventricles are. Again, the ventricles and also the dural sinus, there's parts of the brain that do not contain brain tissue. These are basically fluid-filled areas, so those don't need to be perfused. Right, but the brain itself, white matter, gray matter, should be all green. Now, these were the two European whole body cases. I'll show you a couple more European brain-only cases in the end. These are all immersion vitrifixation cases, but quickly moving for whole body cases to the US cases. Before we go to the US cases, we expanded to the US a while ago. And for our US expansion, we are working with an organization that has been doing cryopreservation cases, or at least the people who are in that organization have been doing cryopreservation cases for all the US organizations and for everybody in the US over the last, decades by now. The organization that kind of has these people now is called RBS, Research in Biomedical Sciences, and we subcontract with them, at least as one of our starting partner. Now, what has not been done in the US much is what we do, or what is called whole body field cryoprotection, where you do the whole perfusion procedure on site wherever the patient is. This case that you still see here is one of these whole body field cryoprotection cases, where we send the team with one of our ambulances to the person, and then when the person is pronounced and we're allowed to take over, the team immediately starts and then does the whole initial stabilization, chest compressions, plus surgery and perfusion on site, then starts cooling down, and then depending on how far away we're from Switzerland, either the cool down goes to dry ice and then you ship on dry ice, or the cool down is still ongoing and then you continue in Switzerland. Now, that is a new procedure. It's not a new procedure. It's not fundamentally a new procedure. It's just a new procedure that has not been done in the US for the last decades. We have done all of our field cases. We've always done whole body field cryoprotection. So this is our standard procedure. I'm saying this because the cases that you will see are not up to our standards. So how they're being done, we're not, to be fair, not super happy with it. But as I said, it's our responsibility. We said we're going to work with RBS, right? So now we need to figure out how to improve it. And I have now partially joined, not as a team member, of course, but as an advisor, to make sure that gets fixed. If it doesn't get fixed, we need to find, and we're already working on that right now, we need to find another solution to US. For us, as I said, stuff can go wrong, but it is not acceptable that stuff continues to go wrong. It needs to be fixed. And if we don't see that is being done to our fullest satisfaction, then we need to find others. And again, we're already working on that as an alternative, because of course we can't wait for it. you will kind of see this if we go to 2 slides in the front forward. You see, for example, here the temperature data. It's all over the place. Like we put here incomplete and inconsistent data. There's extrapolation already in there. We're not sure if this temperature, no, we know that some of this temperature data cannot be correct, cannot have these fast cooling rates, right? You see, for example, this blue line here that drops from, I don't know, like 25 to 30 degrees to 0 degrees, like super, super quick, right? So take all of these graphs with a big grain of salt, right? We will, of course, mark that in the case reports that are published. So we would not currently say this data is reliable. There's on the next slide, you see a CT scan. The US CT scans, we currently cannot calibrate correctly. The reason for that is that there is, in the US, how the cryoprotective agent that we use, it is mixed in a slightly different way, but it's a very important difference for the CT scanning. Maybe to briefly elaborate, and of course, again, in our case reports, there will be an additional document showing how exactly the CT scan calibration, how we do it, how we calculate the values, how we assign the colors, and so on and so on. So you can, of course, then dig much deeper. The main reason being that these cryoprotective agent concentrations, different concentrations that you perfuse, they're being made up from ethylene glycol and DMSO. And of course, there's a carrier solution, but for this topic, only the cryoprotective agent part is important. Now, as I said before, what you pretty much scan is the DMSO. You basically see the sulfur, right? If that high molecular weight atom has gotten everywhere into the brain. Now, in our case, here what we do in Europe and how we also advise everybody to do it, every concentration is equal parts ethylene glycol and DMSO. The cryoprotective agent that was used here in these cases was the low concentrations are only ethylene glycol based. And then the highest concentration is again the same. The highest concentration with us in the US is the same. It's a 50-50 mixture of DMSO and ethylene glycol. Now, the problem is that since we measure the DMSO, we cannot exactly tell apart the partially perfused parts. So we do know that this cryopreservation case here, is not greatly perfused. So it's not up to where we want to be. Absolutely not. So it's definitely below that. But where exactly it is, we can't say. Because now that there's a mixture of high concentration cryoprotective agent, that is 50-50 e.g. ethylene glycol, with low concentration cryoprotective agent, that is only e.g., we have these weird mixtures and don't actually know how good the cryoprotective capacity of that solution is in tissue. Long story short, we know that these cases are not up to our standards, but we don't know how good or how bad they exactly are. But we're definitely not happy and will change something. So if in the US this continues, then again it's our responsibility. On the next slide, you see there's some, again, you see very curves all over the place. Pressure data, we're also still missing some data that we're still accumulating. So you will see more, like a more complete picture in the case reports. For now, if you go to the next slide, I can say that in this case, the SST part, the initial stabilization part, based on what we see, went very well. You can see this, that you basically have very extreme shrinkage here. So on the left side, on the bottom left, you see basically a brain, and then the outer layer where you see this kind of fluid level, that's on the outside cryoprotective agent, on the inside is brain. So there's really high amount of shrinkage, and high amount of shrinkage means that there was very low ischemia. So that part went very well. If you go to the next slide, you see that there as well. So very, very strong shrinkage, which again is in the current procedure, how you do procedures. That's a good sign. Of course, down the line, we mentioned this many times, we're working on blood-brain barrier modifiers. So where during the cryoprotective agent perfusion, before more precisely, you would open the blood-brain barrier so that then the cryoprotective agent goes into the tissue and doesn't dehydrate it. Of course, this is not fully ready yet, so it wasn't done here. So in this case, shrinkage means good initial stabilization. But from a CT scan perspective, we have the same issue as I said in the prior case. We cannot fully analyze it, and we do know that it's not perfect or not great. How good or how bad it is, we still need to figure out if there is a way to analyze it. Currently, yeah, we don't have a way of how to tell these two potential issues apart. Now, going forward, I'll show you a few more cases that we've done here in Europe. So these are immersion vitrifixation cases. Immersion vitrifixation is the procedure that in our mostly we do for brain cases or brain-only cases. They basically mean initially immersion in fixative and then cryoprotection. They are also done, it's also the standard procedure if there's very high ischemia cases. If there's very high amounts of ischemia, then attempting perfusion is not advisable, right? It just doesn't make sense. You would do more damage than you would do good because you have anyway so much ischemia. So if you perfuse with cryoprotective agent, you get swelling and so on. So it doesn't work. So in that case, you would also switch over to immersion vitrifixation. Now, what you see here, the initial part of the immersion and or perfusion, both can be done with a fixative, that goes pretty quick. And then the cryoprotection, the immersion cryoprotection takes a tremendous amount of time. You can see here that this has been going on for around 20 months or so, so a tremendous amount of time. You also see it's labeled P5, so this was one of our cases that has been very long in the past, right? So these are cases that go over multiple years. Last year we published a case report for this case that was a preliminary one, and now we have the final one coming up and being online around tomorrow. On the weekend. Now, what you can see here, basically you immerse it first in low concentration cryoprotective agent, 5%, then you go to 10%, then to 30%, and then to 70%. Basically to let the cryoprotective agent go in slow steps into the tissue, to not cause any osmotic damage. And then you wait so long in the highest concentration cryoprotective agent until you see in a CT scan that now the brain has completely diffused and every part of the brain has gotten enough cryoprotective agent. This is why this takes so long. So in this green area here, we do consistent CT scans, and then we see that the density goes up in the brain, meaning the cryoprotective agent concentration goes up in the brain, and then we do the cool down once we know that now the cryoprotective agent concentration is high enough in the tissue. On the next slide, you see one of those cool down charts. It basically just means, okay, we go again less than 1 degree per hour. We go down in temperature until we're at negative 196 degrees. And then we put the brain in a CT scanner again. And after that, we put them into the long-term storage stores. Now, on the next 5 slides, you see basically these brains that have been immersion vitrifixed, immersion vitrifixed, yeah. All of it green. Next slide, same story. You see a strong difference here between gray and white matter. So gray matter usually perfuses and takes up more cryoprotective agent. Gray matter takes up less cryoprotective agent. On the next slide, you see the same story. One more time, and then one more time. So you can click further through. Of course, again, feel free to, can go in depth in the case reports. And of course, if someone has a question of something super detailed that we're not covering today, of course, more than welcome to just send us an email, and we're also happy to discuss this further. There's 2 more cases that happened this year. This is P24 and P25. These are both cases that we have recently started. So there's going to be case reports, but there's preliminary. There's basically nothing to say about these cases yet, except for that we started the immersion the immersion cryoprotection, which will take somewhere between 12 to around 12 months about, usually a bit more than that, until the case is done. So most likely in the case reports 2027 for 2026, we will have those cases completed. Now, if we go one slide further, you will again see the Slido link, now also with a QR code that you can scan, or you type in this URL. This is where you ask questions. And again, don't only ask questions, but also look through the other questions that other people have posted. If there's something that you feel like is super exciting and you want to definitely have answered, right, you can up and downvote those. And then I already see there's a lot of people have upvoted some questions. And then, of course, I'm going to try to prioritize the ones that have the most votes. Second prioritization, as I mentioned, is questions that have something to do with the case report and not general questions. We're also hosting another general Q&A with Fernando and me about everything and anything that you might want to know. So stay tuned for that as well. And now, one more thing. If we go one more slide into that, there's one more thing that we want to announce, and some people, of course, have already seen, like at least our vague posting announcement, basically. And now at least there's a date. I'm not going to tell you yet what we're talking about, at least, but there's a date. So there's something big coming at Tomorrow, right? We've been now around for I don't know, 5 years or so, a bit more than that even. So over the last years, we've been working on doing some fundamental changes, making it fundamentally better what it means to sign up for a cryopreservation organization. So on February 18th, we're going to have a big live event with Fernando and me, and potentially also partially the rest of the team, to announce a fundamental change at Tomorrow. For the better, of course. Internally, we called this Tomorrow 2.0, or like a new era begins, right? So I would suggest everybody to join that, especially people who are already signed up with us and people who have thought about signing up with us. And of course, also people who just are thinking about this. So you can find it on our Luma events, right? And on our Luma page. And you can also scan the QR code that you might see to look at, sign up. It doesn't tell you much yet what it is. We might drop some hints in going forward, but mostly it's going to be a secret until February 18th, where again, we're going to have a big event to tell everybody how this is going to go. So I would definitely suggest joining that. And now we can go full screen, and I'm happy to answer any and all questions. And again, with a priority of the ones that are upvoted. Now, all right, I'm starting from the top. There's currently 24 questions, so I'm trying to get through all of them. The first one is, all currently foreseen revival scenarios require molecular nanotechnology, but there's no progress in that field for decades. Does that worry you? So yes, it does. Well, worry is maybe a strong word, but I would definitely like to see significantly more advances in these technologies. Currently, you're right. Currently, nanotechnology, there would need to be some repair. There's definitely nanotechnology would be required. There is a chance that at some point we're going to get so good at doing cryoprotection, new cryoprotective agents, for example, very fast cooling and very fast warming technology, that maybe you could get away from the requirement of nanotechnology. But of course, that's currently far away, and currently that would be the case. So the only reason why I'm maybe more optimistic is, as most of you know, some of you might know, initially I started out working on human longevity and trying to, just make the pill or the treatment or the many pills or whatever it is to let people live longer. And then I switched over to cryopreservation, mostly because the main advantage is once you're in cryostasis and once the world doesn't end, it doesn't matter if nanotechnology in this case is developed in 10 or 20 or 50 or 100 years, right? For all intents and purposes, you can wait indefinitely as long as the organization is around. So I don't think that molecular nanotechnology will take 1,000 years or like tremendous amounts of time, but I would also definitely not bet on the next 10 or 20. Of course, whenever I say that, I mean, if there is nothing akin to super AI or very, very powerful narrow AI, which of course might change all time frames. So yeah, it worries me a bit, but I don't know what I could do about it. We have all of our hands full with improving cryoprotection. So unfortunately, this would need to be something that the future needs to solve. You claim that you value structure or viability. So why not move to a formaldehyde-based method? So there's a couple of reasons for that. First of all, we're not against fixation or aldehyde stabilized cryopreservation, or what we call immersion vitrifixation, or anything like that. In fact, as you see, we use this in certain circumstances. There is a couple of downsides though. So first of all, it still needs to be shown that fixation-based approaches can reliably be done in the field with humans. That has not been done. So I know that this field, there's always a lot of data from lab values, and the lab stuff looks good. But then again, as I said, cryopreservation currently, it's not a lab. It's not in a lab environment. It's in a real-world emergency medicine-like environment, where unfortunately there are logistical considerations. So few of these logistical considerations would, for example, be to doing this in a vehicle-based way is quite difficult. Then, depending on who you ask, there's a big disagreement of how much ischemic time there would be allowed to still get good fixation. Some people argue, and again, I'm not an absolute expert in fixation, and I also want to say that some people super disagree with that assessment and think, even if you have a good amount of ischemia and a good amount of delay, you can still get good fixation. But in some cases, or some argue that if you have some amount of ischemia where you would still get good cryoprotection, you would not be able to do good fixation anymore. Now, in the real world, there is usually, not always, but usually there is a relevant amount of ischemia that might impede fixation. But again, that's a contentious topic, and some people in the field of fixation also say this is totally not an issue. I think about this in the following way. Cryoprotection has more real-world data. There's more information of how to actually do this in a reliable way in the field. Now, training two procedures, the field is currently a very, very small field. So, of course, one argument could be that you could offer whoever wants fixation can have fixation, or a combination of fixation and cryoprotection, and other people just go for cryoprotection. The reason why we have decided to not do that, at least not if it's not absolutely necessary, is that small amounts of teams that, again, unfortunately no one has raised billions yet, and definitely we also don't have billions available or even close to that. Training two procedures is quite complex, and you risk that now the team can do nothing right? And now you have all the logistical problems and so on. So while I'm not opposed to it in any way, logistically it is more difficult to do. But there's one thing where we might in fact start doing this, or might in fact start offering it. If this electron microscopy data that I mentioned, during well-perfused cryoprotection cases, meaning the CT scan looks good, but then the electron microscopy data over multiple rounds, there can be cases where for whatever reason it doesn't look good, but if this doesn't get good, we would need to switch. Electron microscopy needs to look good. We don't have the data yet, and I think, to my understanding, is we're one of the very first. There might be one case or so before, but we are there's very, very few cases with electron microscopy data after cryoprotection. So for the time being, since that is an established procedure, we're staying with this procedure. But in the future, if electron microscopy data does not look good after cryoprotection, we will offer it as well. Sorry, that was a bit of but also luckily it answers the next question, it seems. Do you plan to provide glyceraldehyde conservation methods which improve connectome conservation at the price of irreversibility in the future? Same answer. It improves connectome in the lab settings. In the lab settings, I think there's good data. But it still needs to be shown that this can be reliably done in the field. And then if at the same time it cannot be done with cryoprotection, then yes, we would offer it. Is there an annual report? Financial stability is crucial, i.e. how many patients to reach break even and how financially stable, how how is financial stability ensured in the meantime? So yes, there are reports. You find them on the foundation pages. So all the long-term storage stuff, of course, is on the foundation sites. The foundation that is the overseeing body of the patients, the Patient Care Foundation, already has enough money to be profitable, right? It doesn't need to be supported by anybody else. The European Biostasis Foundation has donation money for many, many years, and would, on an operative basis, on an annual basis, be from just cryoprotection, from the people in cryopreservation, around 100 people or so in cryostasis. That might take a few years, but then again, the organization has money for many, many years. Way more than, at least if our growth currently goes on as it is, would be required. On the Tomorrow side, we could always go profitable if we need to, but of course, I'd rather spend money on research. If I can get money from other people, from supporters, from investors, from grant money and so on, I'd rather take that, push more on research, but always have the chance to fall back to if I need to. In the meantime, luckily, we currently have enough money to push research for a good while. But if this ever becomes, in quotation marks, less stable, then we would spend less to then be more stable. Right, next question is, I would like to send along some funds that I could access after revival. Preferably, they would be invested in the global stock market, bond market. Is that possible? That will hopefully be possible soon. Currently, this is a bit difficult, at least if you want the money back. So, meaning not back when you're being revived, but back if you change your mind. So this combination of being able to accept money, then invest that money, and then if the person changes their mind because now they don't care about cryopreservation anymore, then you have that money returned to them while they're still alive. That is legally quite difficult. Just accepting the money and then having it returned in the future once they're being revived, that is significantly easier. But then it's basically a one-way street in this life, basically. So if this is something you want to do, you can reach out. If you want to have the option that you can give it back, hopefully by the end of 2026, we have a solution. And by the way, if you feel like I'm not comprehensively answering any of the questions, feel free to just put it up in again, and then I'll come back to this at the end. Let me quickly check off the questions that I have already answered to not lose track. Next one would be, little support for cryopreservation is largely due to no successful reanimation cases. Shouldn't we support research in this direction on par with preservation? So yes, if we would be able to bring someone, definitely, but also if it's possible to bring an animal back from cryostasis, that would probably, jumpstart the sector quite significantly. There's one big problem, that this is very difficult. And most likely the relatively, again, limited amounts of money that the whole field currently has, if you would put money into that, you would basically, it would be drops in a bucket. It wouldn't do much. So I think for the time being, it makes more sense to improve putting people into cryostasis, even though, of course, yeah, this kind of then relies on the future a bit. And then here, once in a while, fund a project that goes more on the revival side. As you might know, we and I are deeply involved in Cryo.bio as well, this organization that funds research in this space, and one of the research projects called CryoRed. Take a look if you haven't seen it yet. I think it's cryorec.com or .org, one or the other. It's a research project where we fund a research lab to put a rat into high sub-zero and then bring it back. And then hopefully take it lower and bring it back. Take it lower in temperature and bring it back. This will probably not be cryogenic temperatures in the first iteration, very unlikely, but at least it goes into that direction. So we're doing some things, but by and large, I think it still makes more sense to put money into improving cryoprotection. Are you considering using magnetic nanoparticles in the future? No, we're currently not using that and don't plan to. Because it's kind of, once you put them in, I mean, they're better, you can't take them out. And of course, that's a double-edged sword. But currently we do not put them in. Once there's more research, we might start to, or we might give the options to start if someone wants to, maybe. Even though there would need to be more research, because otherwise making an informed decision here is quite hard. What is the worst way of dying, and what is best for cryopreservation? I mean, the worst way is like airplane crash over the Atlantic or something like that, right? In that case, so I mean, you can go, you can go very wild with what could be the worst case, right? Plane crash over the Atlantic is definitely probably so bad that you would never be cryopreserved, right? Because we would never get access to your body, so we couldn't cryopreserve you. In a realistic sense, bad is anything unattended death. So you die at home without anybody noticing for a day or two. That's definitely not great. We would still cryopreserve you. Like, to be fair, it would not be perfusion at that time anymore. It would be straight freeze. But at least maybe it's possible to repair straight freeze in the future. Right? Like, in the cryostasis revival book from Robert Freyes, there is at least a plan how potentially this might work. Right? And of course, this is speculative, but so is all the other nanotechnology stuff. Another unrealistic bad way is if you die, let's say you have some terminal condition, it doesn't look bad yet, but then you die and we don't have a team there yet. Accidents, of course, are very bad. So don't go to bungee jumping that much, because if there's an accident, there's always an investigation, which always delays, which means also then straight freeze. Good in quotation marks. The best thing you can do is live as healthy and as long as you can. Give us more time in the whole field, more time to make cryopreservation better. So the best that you can do is, live happy and long. And then, if you want to, choose cryopreservation as the very last thing you do. And in that case, if it's a disease, let's say cancer, and it's very clear that the person will die, and then it goes worse, and we can send a team, and everybody's on site, and so on. From a logistics standpoint, that would help have a good cryopreservation. Where are the electromicrographs? The electromicrographs are on my computer right now. We don't have all of them yet. We're still getting additional data. We also don't have all the ones yet for 3D reconstruction. And since electromicroscopy is probably a new topic for most of the people who are in this event right now, we decided to spin this out into a separate event, because we were a bit late, but we're kind of already now over time. So we're going to have a separate event on electromicroscopy and the electromicroscopy data once we fully have it, probably in a couple of weeks, fingers crossed, if not, relatively soon. Do you think the American teams are doing wrong to such a subpar result? What do you think? It's a long list, unfortunately, I think, in my mind right now. So we were a bit surprised, because these are not like random people we found. These are the people who have been doing cases, some of them for decades, in America for all other organizations. Field cryoprotection is a new thing. Right, so on one hand, it's something new, but of course, it's not like we told them one day before the first case that please do field cryoprotection now. Like, this has been, of course, a multi-month decision and discussion, and of course, we only started offering signups once they said we're ready. It's more like it's not like this one thing where I would say, hey, there's one big problem. It's more like a list of smaller things. And some of these things we had in the beginning as well. Don't get me wrong. When we started out, not everything was perfect. Far from it. And neither is it today. We have a lot to improve. Maybe to give an example, it's for the longest time, for the initial cases that we've been doing, we had data loggers that we bought, temperature data loggers, that some cheap, some super expensive. Like from $50 devices to, 800 euros per temperature logger. They're all horrible. I've not found a temperature logger that is good. The battery runs out. They don't record for whatever reason. You press the button, but you don't see. Like, they're all bad, A to Z. And then we decided to build our own. Like, luckily, we have one of our engineers. We literally built our own PCBs, our own boards, where we designed them ourselves. And now we have a custom-made data logger device that logs temperature data and pressure data and everything we need. But of course, this was a longer project, and now we don't have these problems anymore. And by the way, we're happy to provide this, and of course, we will provide this if the other organization is down for it. It's these types of things. The difference that I currently see is that, yeah, we had them in the beginning as well, but then we fixed them. And now, hopefully, we can get this kind of faster iteration going in other regions of the world as well. Do you plan to make your cryopreservation more affordable, even in the case of small reduction, e.g. by removing some procedures? So we have the kind of mental guiding principles that we want to, that cryopreservation should just be a choice that you choose if you want it or not. It has nothing to do with how wealthy you are or whatever. So, of course, this is not fully possible. We do two things. On one, we work on making cryopreservation, the actual procedures, cheaper. One of the reasons why we offer brain-only preservation is because this was the only way how we can make it more affordable right now. We would always recommend whole body, but then brain-only is an option as well. Of course, people fund it with life insurance and so on. So if you're relatively young and relatively healthy on a monthly basis, it might not be that expensive after all. But we will try to improve price more, a reduced price more. What we will not do, we will not offer like less good procedures, or we take something away and make it cheaper. We would rather do it if someone reaches out to us and says, listen, I really don't have any money. We will try on an individual basis and see what we can do. Either we do it a bit more affordable, or maybe we find some donors, or whatever. We can do it as a research case. So this will always be an individual one-to-one discussion. It will not be like we also have this low quality tier. This, I think, there should not be a race to the bottom who can do the cheapest and worst, like in turn not good cryopreservation. And then on the other hand, for membership fees, as you know, we have 50 euros per month membership fee, $55. For this, we have means-tested pricing. So if someone reaches out to us and says, listen, I really can't afford it, they of course need to provide proof, but then we're willing to drop this membership fee. We have some people who really, went through hard times or gotten into hard times, and really, money is really tight right now. And then we're okay with temporarily reducing their membership fee to even very, very small amounts. And then, once times are better, then membership goes up again. Since the cost will be reduced over the years, will this be reflected in the insurance policy taken? Yeah, kind of course. Like, so if let's say the price in the future is only 50,000 euros, or 50,000 US dollars instead of 200 or 220, then you need less insurance. So that would be the case. If you currently have already insurance policy, you could, in theory, cancel that and then have a new one. It's a bit more difficult maybe, but in theory this would be possible. But then again, overfunding your cryopreservation procedure does make some amount of sense, and we would always highly recommend it. For example, if there's new technology coming up, for example, intermediate temperature storage, which will in fact happen soon, then you would already have the funds for these potentially more expensive new technologies. I would like to sign up my kids also. Is that currently possible? If not, why not? And when will it be available? It is possible. It depends a bit on the age. There's some disclaimers, like who needs to decide, parents, both parents, and so on. But fundamentally, it's definitely possible. Reach out to us and we can discuss the details. Just write support at Tomorrow.bio. And of course, not only for that inquiry, but for everybody else as well. Feel free to just always reach out, and we try to get back to you as quick as possible. When can we expect the initial results of blood-brain barrier modifiers concerning the shrinkage issue in test cases? Lab results very soon, probably within the next couple of weeks, low amounts of months. Implementation into standard practice, hopefully this year. So my hope would be that this year we will have the first cases with blood-brain barrier modification and electron microscopy. because these two things, of course, so some of the EM data, while in cryoprotective agent, it usually looks a bit less good, is because you have shrinkage. So all the cells kind of dehydrate, which looks then a bit, not as it's supposed to be. But with the blood-brain barrier modifiers, that doesn't happen anymore. So hopefully this year. From the beginning of Tomorrow.bio, have you seen any technology improvement in cryopreservation? Yes, a lot of them. We implemented a lot of them. It's not like this is this one big technology improvement and now everything is different. It's more so like, how do you do cannulation? We're now working on femoral cannulation, which would be a new methodology, while chest compressions are still running, and so on. So it's like these smaller or mid-scale things that all together add up to actually improve the quality quite substantially. It's not so much that there's this one big thing that I saw that changes everything, like a fundamentally better cryoprotective agent, for example. I still hope that something like that can be possible soon. And again, like this blood-brain barrier modification would be more on that level. So maybe ITS would be. So far, over the last years, I have not seen like this big breakthrough. But then again, science and research mostly is not these big monster breakthroughs. It is grinding, the small and adding up the small things. What advisory help can you provide to ensure all legal paperwork is correctly done for a customer's country to avoid issues when death occurs? First of all, reach out to us. So for a good amount of countries, we have a relatively good understanding what is needed. Of course, that is not true for every country, right? So far, most cryopreservation cases that I've been known, no matter the country, even though there's some workarounds still within staying, of course, within legal bounds, but some workarounds. It has always, the legal limitations have never been the primary factor why a cryopreservation case went good or bad. They have often an impact and can have an impact, but on average, it's not the biggest factor. But for detailed things, of course, reach out, and we're more than happy to help as much as we can. Do you have any non-confidential patients who were open cryanalysts whose name you may publish? No, we fundamentally just say we don't publish. I mean, if one of our members wants to do it themselves, of course they're more than they're allowed to do that. But we currently have the policy of not publishing personal information. When will there be standby ambulances in every US state? Having one ambulance in every US state, that might take a while. We're currently adding 2 additional ones, one in Texas and then another one in California, in progress at least. And maybe the California one will be, in the end, but it will be on the West Coast. For coverage, we currently focus on these 3 states, right? California, New York, and Florida. But if you live in another state and you're dead set on signing up with us, reach out and we can discuss the ups and downsides. Feel free, we can chat. Should you get life insurance before or after being cryopreserved? I don't understand the question. Definitely before, because otherwise life insurance doesn't work. Maybe I misunderstand the question, or there was something else, but life insurance needs to definitely be bought before. Why are you happy to cooperate with cryanalysts without medical education to set up local SST, but do not work with local embalmers, funeral agencies? We're generally open to work with everybody who's local, also if they're funeral homes or embalmers. The thing that we do not work with anybody that is not trained. So historically, what was done with funeral directors and embalmers is that organizations have said, hey, listen, if you're in this country, that is the funeral director that can do your cryopreservation. That has not been true, at least on average. Like if you look at the quality results, if they're even published, then on average, funeral directors just have a different job. Like cryopreservation is difficult, right? Doing good cryoprotection is not easy. So we don't do that. But if there is a funeral director or an embalmer or a random person or an EMT or a nurse, or it doesn't matter, who is willing to come to our trainings, to be trained, to actually read, to understand how preservation should be done, again, go to more training and so on, and keeps up with that, then who they are does not really matter as long as they're trained. So even though I'm a doctor, I feel like, it's absolutely possible to train these procedures to literally anybody. Anybody who has some amount of hand-eye coordination. But it's not necessary. There's no, it's just a training thing. It's like almost everything. So that is the requirement, not necessarily what their background is. And there we have a relatively high bar. So coming to one training doesn't work. Coming to two trainings doesn't work. You need to really stick with it and learn how these procedures are being done and get the experience and put in your time and effort and so on. In what year could a cryopreserved person be revived, and would they remember past events like a trip to Antarctica? So the second part, absolutely yes. If this is not the case, the whole thing doesn't work. You need to keep your memories, right? Otherwise, why do we do this? And as far as we understand the parts that you want to keep around, ultrastructure, synapses, connectome, the weights of those connections, that is the thing that makes you, that encodes your memories, right? And of course, the goal is to keep that around. When that will be possible, your good is almost as good as mine, maybe. I don't know. I feel like everything I'm saying is speculative and doesn't really have a good basis in data. So it's not going to be 10 years, I think. It's probably not going to be 1,000 years. My cop-out answer is somewhere between 50 and 100 years. Not because I think actually 50 or 100 years, because this is kind of like a very blurry time frame where the world might be fundamentally different and things that we can't imagine right now would be possible. What is your biggest fear in cryonics? That it doesn't work? I don't know. Of course, I'm doing this because I think it's currently the best chance that I have and everybody else has, and everybody else should have that right to be around in 200 years from now, or 500 years from now, or 1,000 years from now, right? But it's not like I have my one biggest fear. There's a lot of stuff that I improve, right? Or I want to improve, or we want to improve. And, I personally have another, 40, maybe 50 years, hopefully, until I get cryopreserved. So hopefully that long. And hopefully longer. But so I'm just putting in every day, every week, every month, every year, we think about what do we think is the highest priority that we can do to make cryopreservation better. Is it working on financial stability? Is it working on governance stability? Is it working on science? Is it working on fundamentally working on your cryoprotective agent? Is it working on logistics, or a combination of all of those things? And then we work on those. I don't really have this one big fear that I think this is the linchpin. Everything else is going to be simple. It's a combination. Am I Swiss? Nope, I'm German. But the facility is in Switzerland, but I'm not Swiss. Why do you recommend whole body over brain only? I recommend it because, better safe than sorry. There's no strong reason why a brain is somehow bad or anything like that. But in our case, the perfusion is the same. So we perfuse in both cases. Just in one case, only the brain is being kept. In the other case, the whole body is being kept. We do this because of an abundance of caution, right? The decision for brain only, in my mind, should only be because of money. If you feel like whole body is too expensive, can't afford it, don't want to afford it, then brain, totally fine. But for all other reasons, whole body, if there are revival technologies in the future, that for whatever reason it's easier to revive the whole body. The brain you can always take out and continue with just the brain. But there is an edge case, of course, where maybe you want the whole body. I don't think these arguments are strong. I'm just saying it's an abundance of caution. Can you compare the difference of cryonics in the US, Germany, and other countries such as Russia in terms of quality? Yeah, but we might need to schedule another meeting for that. You can do that as well. So just download all the case reports that you can find, right? Download all of our case reports, download all the case reports from all the other organizations, and then look at the CT scans. First of all, look if there even is a CT scan. And then if there is one, look at the CT scan. And then you can at least evaluate if the stabilization was done early enough to allow and well enough to allow for perfusion. And the perfusion was done well enough so that the brain has gotten cryoprotective agent in most of the brain, or all of the brain. Otherwise, it would be Of course, I'm slightly biased here, but if someone asks me if someone is terminal and which country in the world I should go to, I would strongly suggest Germany or Switzerland. But again, this is not something where you need to take my word for it. And of course, as you know, as you might agree, I'm a bit biased here. But just look at the CT scans and other quality metrics. I think this is there's organizations that don't even publish anything, right? They can make any claim or say anything. Like if they don't have data, how would anybody ever know? Can you preserve a body without the brain? Nope, that is not possible with us, and also revival is not possible with it. Would it make sense to carry out an experiment and verify ischemic damage when body is in hypothermia before death? Pet euthanasia could make it legally viable. This has been done in rat experiments. So it does make sense to quantify ischemic damage. It has been done. Right. Thank you for the webinar. I wanted to ask what steps are being taken to address the resuscitation process for patients who are cryopreserved. I think I briefly touched on that already in a prior question. It's basically research in rat experiments. We don't do it ourselves. We funded labs through Cryo.bio, for example, and also through EVF to do that type of research to gain more knowledge here. Can you share all your raw data for research purposes? I work at a university and would like to go deeper into the details and apply processing algorithms. Depends on what raw data you mean. We're happy to share if someone says, "Hey, I have an idea how to analyze it better." For example, the CT scans or whatever. It will always need to be on a research basis. We're also happy to share this with other organizations, but it would always require that they also do it. With researchers and so on, of course, reach out to us and we see what we can do. It would always be anonymous, of course, but yeah. Do you perform a standby if a person has an insurance contract? What if you arrive, the person survived in the end, who will pay? Yes, if we determine that this person will likely die in the next couple of days, we send a team. And then if nothing happens and we need to withdraw the team again, it's on us, right? If you say, I want standby, because I have a small operation where we say, based on that operation, there is no reasonable expectation that anything goes wrong, super standard, right? Then you would need to pay. But if there is actually something where we deem, hey, looks like it might not be, there might be some relevant risk, right? Definitely, of course, in terminal conditions, then we pay. Yeah, it's on us. Can you guarantee that when I arrived, I will be happy? No, I cannot guarantee it, but I think if you would be a betting person, the future is likely better than the present, right? Including personal happiness. So I think it's a good gamble, but I cannot guarantee it. And by the way, in the interest of time, this is about the time where you should submit your last questions, and I'm trying to go through the last ones relatively quick because I'm running a bit of time and need to go, unfortunately, soonish in my next meeting. My mother has been cryofrozen this year from Dr. Hampel, who has made the action. Has everything gone well with that name? You would need to reach out to us. We don't disclose any information on individual cases. What about the eyes? Are they impacted positively? I don't understand the question. Maybe rephrase it, otherwise I don't understand it. What is your opinion on do-it-yourself cryonics for people who cannot afford a contract for real? No options. Is do-it-yourself cryonics better than this? Probably, absolutely. I don't know how that would work because long-term storage just costs a good amount of money. So really do-it-yourself is really tough. But my thinking is anything is better than cremation or burial. And now, anything. And then you can go, and of course, my goal is to push that as much as possible, while at the same time trying to enable the most amount of people to afford it. So, but yeah, I cannot easily, of course, in theoretical scenarios, I can come up with something, but in realistic scenarios, I think cremation or burial is pretty bad. Can you start a hardship fund for us to contribute for those who don't have the funds? Yeah, we might do some hardship contributions in the future. We have individuals that in hardship situations have in the past provided funding, but of course this cannot be a guarantee by any means. In individual situations, if you are in one of those situations, please reach out to us and we try what we can do. Cryopreservation is a long-term process. My main concern is the long-term viability of the company, what financial business continuity plan is in place. So for long-term storage, the company has nothing to do with long-term storage. That's all foundations, right? And everything I can think of, from governance to financial security and safety and so on, these foundations optimize on stability. Even if something goes wrong here, nothing happens. Of course, I'll do everything to not have anything go wrong, and we're operating the organization significantly more on the safety side than you might do in other organizations. None of it is, of course, a guarantee. You can just rest assured that, I personally very highly value that there will be an organization that puts me in cryostasis if need be. So it's very close to heart that these organizations are all as stable and safe. And from a continuity standpoint, of course, there's other people on the board. There's Fernando here is in leadership who would take over if, fingers crossed, but if something happens to me. Can you find some legal way for you to access my bank account in the case of an accident? I can't get insurance and have no relatives who can. There's something called a payable on death account. Payable on death, in German, Bankkonto zugunsten Dritter. That might be something to look into. And apart from that, reach out to us. Do your employees have free contracts? A few dedicated alcohol have died without preservation due to temporary lack of funding, which is immoral. So for everybody who works with this, we offer that we pay for insurance and for all the other membership fees. So yeah. Will the video of the meeting be available? Yes, I think it's automatically on YouTube. Do you have been quoted in German politics? You have been quoted in German politics on some German politics domain. Okay, cool, thank you. How much could revival cost, and what could societal reintegration looks like? Both very good questions. I have no idea. Hopefully it's enough. There's enough money available, but in detail, I don't know. Like it's very tough to estimate. Of course, there's way more to say about this, how we think about this, and so on. But we would need to keep that for a general Q&A webinar, which again we're gonna schedule soon. Have you ever had problems with insurance companies? Which ones would you recommend or not recommend? No, we haven't had any problems. No, I think all European big insurance companies are fine. Can the family visit the cryogenic body of the family member? Yes, the facility, yes. Of course, they're in large stainless steel tanks, so you don't see anything, but coming by is possible. Someone says cryopreservation is not possible. Someone is an esteemed physicist. That's totally fine. Someone in the past said that we only need a couple of megabytes of RAM, and that has not turned out to be true. So no one is forced to be cryopreserved if someone would rather be cremated. I think my argument that cryopreservation at least has a higher chance than cremation is a pretty good argument. And if that person wants to discuss it in an open panel, in like an Oxford-style debate, I'm more than happy to join that if you want to connect us. Do you feel there's any good education course covering the newest cryopreservation procedures? If not, is there something you guys would consider making? No, there is not. There is a good book by Charles Platt and Ashman de Wolf called Cryopreservation Procedures that I would recommend. It's a good A to Z run through. It's not 100% up to date on every point and the newest devices and so on, but it's a good introduction still that gives you a good basis. Other than that, I'm not aware of anything, and to be fair, writing one of those would just be a lot of work. Can you cryopreserve a pet rock? No, but there's other organizations for that probably. How much could revival cost? Oh, we already have that. How did the membership numbers develop? Stay tuned. There's going to be an announcement on that soon. Will there be an IPO? Not anytime soon. And sorry for running through this relatively fast. And by the way, if there's ever an IPO, we would only do it if you can maintain a tremendous amount of control, right? Otherwise, we would not consider this. Thank you for the webinar. I wanted to ask what steps are being taken. I think I got that. Is preservation price fixed per customer, or is it changed with monetary inflation? Once you sign up with us, we guarantee that you will be cryopreserved. Now, if there's new technology that due to inflation, for example, is very expensive, you might not be able to be upgraded to the newest, now not available, not the technology that was not available when you signed up. That, of course, we can't guarantee, because there could be something that is very expensive in the future. Other than that, we always cryopreserve. All right, I'm skipping now questions that might not be 100% serious to be a bit faster. What is the financial situation of Tomorrow if it goes bankrupt? Nothing happens. It's all sorry for those. What happens with the bodies? Nothing. The bodies are all with foundations. Tomorrow is totally independent and financially has money for many, many years. Is there work on financial state instrument that lets you invest the money for a cryopreservation? Can you take the interest on the waste? So once someone is cryopreserved, we can invest that money. And of course we do, to ensure long-term stability of the organization and to pay for the annual cost of cryopreservation. How many members are there at Tomorrow.bio to receive cryopreservation? Stay tuned. Big announcement coming soon. Of course, one had to respond to any margin calls if the investment goes below minimum. Well, if you take out investments with margin, which we don't, then that would be a thing, but we don't. Can you cryopreserve someone who's 600 pounds? In theory, yes, but the cost would go up for that. Are there any? Basically, you need more volume in the doer. All right, last question. Are there any studies on whether cryopreservation causes any damage in personality, memory, neural networks in the brain? Is this an area of study currently? It's being studied. Of course, you can't really make sure, but so current cryopreservation would probably need some repair, like nanotechnology, as we discussed. Detailed studies, I mean, at least not, of course, you cannot bring anything back that really has like memories akin to us from cryostasis. Studies, yes, but no definitive answers. All other questions that you still might have, I must postpone to when we do a full-on A to Z Q&A about anything and everything. We will do that soon. Until further notice, thanks a lot for joining. Look at the case reports that will be published on our webpage in the next couple of days, like most likely over the weekend. And then I hope that I see everybody, and I tell all your friends as well. Most hopefully I see everybody on February 18th for the new area Tomorrow 2.0 coming up. And now, without further ado, thank you so much. Have a great day and talk to you soon.